Welcome to Shelf Life. And today on the shelf we have Reaper of Souls, and I'm talking with Beverley East. We're going to have a conversation about this great book about the Kendall crash. Hello Beverley, and welcome to Shelf Life.
Thank you for having me.
The Kendall crash. You know, I grew up in Mandeville. A lot of people think I come from Moby or some other place, but I actually grew up in Mandeville. And Kendall, we used to take the train into Williamsfield, which is the station after Kendall. Coming from Montego Bay, whenever I had to go to Moby. And Kendall, the only thing I knew about Kendall was that there was a big crash and whole heap of duppy. That's all I know about, is that there's whole heap of ghosts at Kendall because of the crash. So this for me was a gripping story, because you've taken something that is history and turned it into an actual story. But before we get to the story, let's just find out about Bev. Tell me a little bit about you.
Well, I am beyond an author. I'm a handwriting expert. That's my day job. And I am a mother, and I have spent 20 years of my life researching and putting together the Kendall crash.
Wow.
I started the book, and because I was raised in England, I really didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even know mango season. So I put it down. I put it down, as shameful as it is. I put it down and I wrote another book, Finding Mr. Right.
And Finding Mr. Right was a bestseller?
Finding Mr. Right was a bestseller. And then after I wrote Finding Mr. Right, I was like, oh, I'm an author. I need to go back and write the book I was trying to write in the beginning. So I came back and I thought, well, the best way to rekindle my roots was to physically move to Jamaica and know when mango season is. So
why the Kendall crash?
Because my family had died in it. My father lost 14 members of his family that night, and it was very hushed in my family. No one talked about it.
So you didn't grow up knowing
I didn't grow up not knowing anything, and I lived in the house with my father. I was 18. A cousin came to visit us, and she told me, thinking I knew, and I didn't know anything. And so then I asked my dad, and he didn't want to talk about it because he lost both parents, aunts, uncles, everybody. Only we had one survivor. Wow. From an entire family.
I guess he just decided to shut it out completely.
Yeah, and I think at the time my father had moved. I mean, I've always loved my father, but I think I had a greater reverence for him after I researched the book.
And you realized what he went through and what he had to live with.
Live through, and because he was living in England. He had just got to England, and those days there was no proper communication back and forth. There was no money to come back to bury his family, to be a part of that. There was no bodies found to bury. You know, it was just horrible. And my mom, you know, she had to live with this man that was not the man she married. You know, it just shifted.
It shifted everything.
Who they were as a couple, and. He was very quiet, I mean, I think they come from quiet genes. Obviously, I don't have those genes.
You don't have those genes.
I don't have those genes. I come from the Johnson genes.
You come from the loud side of the family.
I come from the mother side of the family. But all the East family are very quiet spoken. But I think it just softened him even more, quietened him even more. And, you know, I just totally have a different regard for him now that I know what I know. But my family wasn't happy that I was moving to Jamaica to do this. They were like, why are you going in that pain?
Bring up the old stuff.
Yes.
How did you feel though when your cousin told you about this incident?
I was shocked. I was shocked because she showed me a picture, and there was people in this picture that I'm like, who are these people? Because she was in this.
And these would have been your aunts and your uncles and your cousins.
My family, East. Yeah. They would have been my family. And I said, who are these people? And she says, what do you mean, who are these people? How you don't know who these people are? And I said, I don't know who these people are. She said, they died in Kendall.
Oh my goodness.
So that because we're very close-knit family, you know, because people say, how come so many of you died one time? And I said, well, it was a church out in St. Annie's. They belonged to the church. And we moved together in herds, you know, as a family. So one goes, all go.
All go.
And that's how so many died that night.
And your father was spared because he wasn't living in England at the time.
Yes, he'd already moved to England.
I'm gonna read. I have to do this. I was gonna wait to do this, but I'm so excited about this book. And this is the familiar tone of Norman Manley, who was the chief minister at the time. It says, "I'm speaking standing on the scene of this unparalleled and appalling railway disaster which happened last night. The damage is indescribable, and unless one was here and saw it with one's own eyes, it would be impossible to believe the extent to which the coaches have been destroyed, crumpled, smashed up, and the disaster is of a scale unknown in the history of railway operations in Jamaica." It was actually of a scale unknown in the history of railway operations, period.
I'm going cold as you're talking it, because when I started to write the book, it was number 5 in the history of disasters. Wow. And when I finished the book, India had 2 really bad train accidents. They pushed it down to number 8. I can't remember the other country in between, but that part that I wrote, I physically got the tape from RJR. Somebody heard I was researching Kendal and called me up and say, "We can give you the tape, or you could listen to the tape." So I listened to the tape and transcribed it. Yes. And so I heard his voice, and if you could hear the tremor in his voice as he was speaking it, and I'm like, the only way I can transform that into the book is just to put it word for word. And that's what I did. So what you're reading is the physical words of what he said from the radio, because at the time there was no TV, there was no Google, there was there
wasn't anything else.
There was nothing but RJR.
Well, we're going to take a quick break here on Shelf Life. I'm talking with Beverley East, author of Reaper of Souls. Great book about the Kendal crash. It's a story, and we'll talk more about it right after the break. Welcome back to Shelf Life. We're talking about Reaper of Souls, a novel of the 1957 Kendal crash, and my guest is Beverley East. Beverley, when you came back home, before the break, we were talking about how you decided to come back to Jamaica because that was the only place you could figure you could really learn about this crash and your family. When you came back home, did you go to Kendal? I mean,
yes, I went to Kendal several times. I went to Kendal several times, and I remember, because there's no, which kind of upsets me still, there's no monument, there's no grave mark, there's nothing there. I took my shoes off and I was walking barefoot because I'm like, anywhere I could be stepping.
Yeah, this is hallowed ground, really.
Yes, so I was walking barefoot, and I took flowers, I prayed, I cried. It was very emotional for me.
I mean, imagine.
The people, the community were just looking at, oh, the Englishwoman, she crazy.
Don't take it to your head back anyway. In Jamaica, we say the cold got to your head.
The cold, Englishwoman, leave her. Because, I was standing there, And so I wasn't really embraced by the community, because every time I came back, they were like,
did they talk to you any at all about what happened?
No, they didn't want to, because I'm sure they want to put it behind them. They're there living in it, so they want to put it behind them. But I did speak to survivors who came from all over the island. I had phone calls. I went to Ocho Rios and spoke to somebody. I went to Montego Bay, went to Portland, and then a couple was done by phone. It was very sensitive, because sometimes I would arrange an interview and then they didn't want to talk about it that day. And there's nothing you can do. It's
just very emotional.
Yeah, that just was not a day that wanted to talk about it.
You were digging up things that had been buried for a mighty long time. So I can imagine that kind of feeling that they would have had. Tell me about some of the people that you did actually speak to. The characters in your book, because I find the characters in the book extremely real. I mean, as I read this, I kind of tried to figure out who was your uncle, who was your cousin, and I know they're fictional characters, but somehow I just kind of figured that they're all you. But the people who you met with, the survivors, were any of those people in this book? I mean, did you? No. None of those people were in this book. All fictional?
I remember a good friend said to me, "Is any of these characters still alive?" And I says, "They're not real people." They're not real people.
You can't tell me that, because these people are so real.
They have to be real, because I felt the first time I wrote Reaper of Souls, I was 100 pages in the book and I couldn't stop crying, and I thought it was too deep, too sad. So I thought, I need to make my characters, what can I do to, because no one was going to read it because it was going to be too sad. So I thought, I have to redevelop the characters, look at the characters again, make them come alive. So what you remember is the triumph.
They really did come alive.
Yes.
I mean, they came alive to the point that the sixth sister, Eve, and I'm just giving away a little bit of the book, Eve actually saved her sister because Esther had to look after her sister Eve, which is why she didn't go on the trip.
Exactly.
And somehow, I mean, I was living in the States when 9/11 happened. And I can think of all the people who had stories about why they were not in the tower.
Yes, yes.
Including a cousin of mine who should have been there for a meeting, but her plane was late.
Yeah, I should have been in the towers with a book signing for Finding Mr. Right, and I cancelled it 2 days before.
So there it is, you know. Here it was that this young girl got saved because she was not there at the time. I find the writing so graphic. I could see the accident scene. To me, it was just so real as I read about the accident scene. But what I found really exciting was that you didn't just dwell on the accident. You took us into the lives of the people afterwards.
Yes, I felt it was the only way it could be written. I thought no one wants to go in that pain, but I have to describe the pain. But I don't want to keep you there that you think, oh, this is too depressing, I can't read anymore. I want you to turn the pages so you never forget them, because I feel that they've been forgotten. These 250 people that died, I feel they've been forgotten.
Are you leading some kind of movement to get a monument or something?
Yes, I'm working on it. Nothing's happened yet, but I'm still working on it to have a monement done.
There needs to be a monument.
There needs to be a monument there, because there's still survivors. And the monument needs to say Reaper of Souls. No, it doesn't. It needs to say 1957 Kendal crash and all the names of the people that died. No, the name of my book doesn't need to be there. Just the souls of the 250 people that died. The souls of the 250
people. Duppy stories.
Oh gosh.
Oh my goodness.
Everybody wanted to give me a Duppy story because I was looking for facts. I mean, I gleaned a lot of stuff from the archives of the Gleaner, and when you asked me about how did I do the crash, I mean, I had those photographs pasted on my wall in my office in front of my computer of all the dead people, and my cousin one day came there and says, take down those pictures, they're so depressing, take them down. But I needed to be in it.
You need to be in it so you could feel it, right?
But the Duppy stories, every survivor I spoke to, and I would ask them specific questions, wanted to tell me a Duppy story. So I said to Dr. Cooper one day, if I hear another Duppy story, I'm going to scream. So she says, oh, you can't exclude it. You can't exclude those stories. It's part of Jamaican folklore. And that's why I created...
And there is a Duppy story.
That's why I created a Duppy story.
The Duppy story is actually really very good. It's like all those stories you hear of people who pick up people on the highway and when they reach where they're going, there's nobody in the car. Beverly, when we get back, we're going to take a quick break. I want you to read that Duppy story, or at least some of that Duppy story. Ladies and gentlemen, we're having a good time here on Shelf Life with Beverley East, author of Reaper of Souls. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Shelf Life. We're talking with Beverley East about Reaper of Souls, the Kendal crash. And before the break, we're talking about Duppy. And for those of you who don't know what a Duppy is, it's a ghost. And in Jamaica, Duppy stories are part of our culture. But with the Kendal crash, with 250 people who lost their lives on the site at Kendal, you know we have some Duppies running around Kendal. So Beverly's going to read us an excerpt from the book.
I'm going to read you about Lucy because I felt, I heard all these stories that people had their jewelry stolen. So my Duppy comes back with the jewelry and then they find out she's not a real person. So when they find her out, this is what she does. The smug smile she wore evaporated from her face. She promptly stood up straight, stepped out of the shoes, peeled off every item of jewelry, the rings, the bangles, the necklaces, the brooches, the pins, the earrings, from all parts of her body, and placed them beside the shoes. Without saying another word, Lucy left the house in her bare feet.
Wow. But, I'm having chills. I'm having chills. The whole Duppy story thing, but that sums it up. But I have to tell the audience that Lucy and one of the characters in the book, who was a survivor, got into a real hot and heavy romance. And it was very interesting because you're reading this romance and you're getting into the romance too, and then all of a sudden you say, but hold on. Lucy does sound right. Why is it that only these 3 people can see Lucy? And so the Duppy story really brought it together. The other thing that I found really worked for me in this book was I was happy that the young lady who was sick, Eve actually was able to live a life.
I think we underestimate people who are sick. I think everybody that has a challenge, a health challenge, they become strength in different ways. And Eve was actually composed. She's actually the only character in the book that comes from a real person, which is my aunt.
Okay.
My dad's sister in London was bedridden all her life, and Eve has my aunt's illness, but is not as sick as my aunt was. Yes.
Okay.
My aunt was just this wonderful person that you could talk to her and read to her, and every little problem, and I'd come and talk to her rather than go to my mom. I'd go to her, and I just found a way to weave her into the story. And her daughter cried when she read the book because she knew it was her mother.
Based on her.
Yeah, she knew it was her mother because the illness and everything is her.
Did you get a feeling of closure, a sense of closure? Did any of your family get a sense of closure from this book?
Well, because I ruffled all their emotions. Not just closure, I think a lot of pride, because they felt I had come from somewhere
and done
this justice to it. So they were surprised, and they didn't have the kind of stuff that I thought, oh, Bev can do that. Bev can do that? How can Bev do that? She live in England. What does she know about Jamaica?
So you have at least one family member who survived Kendall?
Yes, I do.
Who is still living in England?
He's living in England with his family.
With his family?
Yes.
And how much of a part of this book?
Well, it took me 8 years to get the interview from him. He didn't want to talk to me about it. I begged. And then one day his wife said, just talk to her. And he says, come to me on such and such a date, 1 hour, that's all you've got. And that was it.
Oh my goodness.
And that was it. And he says, don't ask me again, don't talk to me again about it. And that was it. And that's what I did, 1 hour.
But was he injured, like really bad?
No, but his sister died. His sister died, and he was thrown from the train. When the train crashed, he was thrown away.
Okay, so I just saw a character.
Yes, yeah, he was thrown. Yes,
the one who was thrown away from the train.
So that description is what he told me. And when I went to see him, he was surprised that I wasn't writing anything down. But every interview I didn't write. I absorbed it.
You have an eidetic memory?
Yes, because I absorbed it so that I could come back and write it the way it was supposed to be, rather than rewrite it, write it, then rewrite it. So I absorbed it. I listened and absorbed.
I can imagine he must have been part of the search. I can just imagine what he went through searching for family.
Well, he didn't do any search because he was concussed.
So he was out of it completely.
Yeah, he was out of it. And they actually thought he was dead because he was in Spalding Hospital when they thought he was somewhere else.
Okay.
And yeah, so he was...
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Boy, Beverley, this is a very moving book.
Thank you.
And I've gone from the highs down to the lows, and to the highs and the lows. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about Reaper of Souls. We're going to take a short break. When we come back with our final segment, Beverley has some friends in house, and they're going to have a little discussion, a quick discussion about this book. We're back with you on Shelf Life with author Beverley East, author of Reaper of Souls. And she has some friends here with her, and they're going to have a quick discussion. I'm going to have them introduce themselves for you.
Hi, Judy.
Hi.
I'm Alison.
I'm Colleen.
And they're going to have a quick discussion about the book.
What I like most of the book is the transition from Jamaica into England. We started out with a Jamaican story. Fortunately, Esther didn't leave. For whatever reason, she decided to stay back. So she, as the character in Jamaica, gave us that picture of how the Kendall train crash had an effect on the people in Jamaica. Whilst Eve and Austin, who went to England, gave us another picture. For me, it was very vivid. I mean, you could see how people lived back then. The Great West Indian Migration was very, very obvious. So I thought that two mixture. The fact that Bev never lived in Jamaica, we got it through somebody else.
Yeah. I grew up in rural Jamaica, so for me it was the focus on Jamaica was a nice nostalgia for me. But the thing that stands out, what I like the most, is I grew up thinking of Kendall Crash as one of the most serious, solemn things in our history, and she was able to create a book that I could laugh in a story about something so serious. It was a nice twist, and the wit and the humor, a lot of it so very Jamaican. And I've never really lived in the UK, so that experience was nice as well, and it was very credible. And I know it was a very emotional write for Beverly East because it's her family story. So I think it must have been challenging to make it so fun. And it was a fun read. It is a fun read, and it is also a serious, deep read.
It's interesting. I never found it funny. I found it to be a good read.
Lucy's funny.
I went to Clarendon College, and the founder of Clarendon College, Lester David, died in the Kendall train crash. So as a child, I grew up hearing the stories, hearing the duppies who go on the train. So that for me was immediately an interest. There were some stories in it that's not blatant, it doesn't blatantly hit you. But when Esther was left alone with Miss Ruby and she was attacked by Maestro, that for me was it's a common story that we hide in this country. He pinned her body down, and the first thing that comes to this girl's mind is he going to rape me? And the fact that Miss Ruby, earlier on in the book, you found Esther hating her. You hate the helpers when they get too involved. But Miss Ruby changed the story when she protected Esther by hiding Maestro's body. Okay, I don't know what influenced that, Bev.
But I felt that I needed to make those two characters bond, because they were so, if the two people are going to be left in the room and my story is hinging on these two characters, they have to come closer together. So, because everybody says, oh, you have Maestro, have that happen to him. But it was mainly to get the two women to bond, because they had to have a secret between them. And I can honestly say to you, that incident, I heard it as a child, the death of that man. It really did happen. I heard it as a child, and I remembered it, and I told my mom, and she says, don't talk about that. And then I says, well, it's already in the book. So she says, well, we don't know exactly who the person is. But for me, Kendall was like a journey. You know, you moving from, the reader is moving from Kingston to London, back to Kingston again. And I think that's just how our lives are. It's a journey, and we have different experiences, and we meet different people. And I wanted the reader to celebrate lives rather than to cry for the 250 people that died.
There are a number of different types of stories,
you know, what I've always
interwoven.
Novelette.
Novelette.
Austin had this beautiful girlfriend in Jamaica. Austin went away to England. Novelette disappeared.
When people go away to
England. That's what happens. That's what happens. Is that, you know, relationships sometimes fall into nothingness, and that's what happened with. But he met Inez, you know. So I think sometimes that happened, and Inez was no joke. Yes, Inez was wonderful. Inez was wonderful. But I also think that I wanted the men in my stories. When I moved to America, I found a lot of stories about men very discouraging. So I wanted to praise the men in the characters in my book, and make the men just be really nice. So it's only Blue, who every woman has loved a man like Blue. Every woman has loved a man like Blue somewhere. Really? Yes. even when you don't want to admit it.
I think I have to agree with you. When you read the book, because you have to read the book, you will see why Blue is such a credible character. The book is Reaper of Souls by Beverley East. And Beverley, you were saying that they can get autographed copies?
Yes, if you go to the website, which is www.writeanalysis.com, write with a W, you can get autographed copies from my website.
Okay, and of course it's available right here at Bookophilia and in all fine bookstores throughout the island of Jamaica. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching Shelf Life. I'll see you again next week. I'd like to thank our guests who are here with us and you for watching. So catch you again next week on some more Shelf Life.